The Sandy Pioneer and Historical Society, Incorporated of Sandy, Oregon, presents a revised showing of the Barlow Road Revisited, produced by Orson and Ruth Goodrich, directed by Marvin Jones, technical directors Mark Patterson and Jeff Grimes. This is Dennis Crowe speaking. Backtracking along the Oregon Trail that they came into the mission Fort the Dalles on, the emigrants turned their wagons south, passing through present-day Four Corners, Kingsley, the community of Dufur, to Tye Valley. From there, they headed west near Waumig, along and above the White River, crossing it, following Barlow Creek through Barlow Pass, passing through today's rhododendron, crossing the Sandy River just west of that community for the first time, along the Devil's Backbone, crossing the Sandy River the second time, through today's city of Sandy, south to the community of Eagle Creek, crossing the Clackamas River and into Oregon City. Into the mission fort at the Dalles in September 1845 came Samuel K. Barlow. It was very late in the year, and the mission fort had already a backed-up jam of emigrants and wagons awaiting their turn for river passage down the Columbia. There was no doubt that these would be unable to get passage and would end up on the mission and fort sands for the winter, and supplies were short. Barlow's train just couldn't be accepted. This being the case, Barlow decided to take his train around 11,253-foot Mount Hood, which he felt he could, although he was told he could get trapped in the heavy snows, which would be on the mountain before they could get over or around it. But Barlow's answer to that was God never made a mountain that he didn't make a place to go around or over it. So he and his small wagon train left at once in an effort to beat the snows. Following a well-worn Indian trail southeast out of the Dalles, he left the Oregon Trail that they had come in on at this spot at East 4th and Washington in present-day the Dalles, and headed mostly uphill, cut through the back and side yard of that home at 9th and East Kelly to follow 3 Mile Road, where today's present highway cuts through the old trace on the left as the old emigrant road heads into today's rolling wheat fields south toward Tye Valley. 3 days out, William H. Rector, who also had been waiting for river passage, overtook Barlow. The size of the Barlow-Rector train was now approximately 10 to 12 wagons, 2 to 5 persons, and loose livestock. Looking north from Tye Valley, the old Barlow Road came over these rolling hills down into the valley, following today's present Highway 197 and Butler Creek Canyon. The Tye Indians, a branch of the Warm Springs Nation, were very friendly to all immigrants. While the train rested here, Barlow and Rector rode out of the valley to the west to find a way out of this hole in the ground, as the leaders referred to this place. After they left, into the valley came Joe Palmer, with 23 wagons, 15 families, and loose stock. Palmer and another man took off at once to catch up with Barlow and Rector to help search for a trail west. They all returned with the same message. This was the only way out and the trail ahead would be rough going. Even though the Tye Indians pleaded for them to wait until spring, as winter was now upon them, they surely would get trapped in the mountain. The Barlow wagon train pulled out, up this hill and draw on the right, following just below the highway, meeting it at the top of the ridge. It was a long and steady pull for the 30 wagons, which were double and sometimes triple teamed. The grade here was very deceiving, as once you started up, one could not stop, as the oxen, mules, or horses just could not hold the wagon, despite brakes or wheel blocks of any type. Even walking up this hill for the 34 families was difficult, and there was the loose stock to drive. This marker near Waumig tells some of the old road history. Here at Gate Creek Meadows and its crossing, some of the old swales of the trail can still be seen today. Mount Hood still beckoned the emigrants on. We imagine that they camped here while the men broke a trail in the heavy timber ahead to another large clearing where they could camp and repeat the process. This was also the site of Barlow and Palmer's toll gate after they finished blazing the road in early 1846. The Barlow train is now getting into the really heavy timber near Emigrant Springs. There were two more named Hope and Charity. Boulder Creek crossing deep in the heavy timber on the south side of the mountain. White River Canyon, which kept the wagon trains well up in the timber. The Clip Creek Hills, which really tested the emigrants' road building and driving skill, and how they took such places as these in their stride. Every such obstacle as this seemed to have gotten progressively worse as the emigrants went further west, preparing them for the next one. The drop into the creek canyon below must be a 20 to 25% grade, with no stopping, so as to keep up speed enough to gain the top of the hill on the other side, which was just as steep. Looking back to the east, we see a group of Clackamas and Wasco County Historical Society old trail finders stand and look in amazement at the old road that must have been another hair-raising ride for the drivers of the wagons. This photo, taken in 1972 of a trail marker, tells the story of what took place here, but we doubt if it still stands today due to the vandalism that goes on. This photo, also taken in 1972, shows some of the old trail finders inching their modern covered wagons down the White River Hill. Some of the old swale can still be seen on the left where it meets this Forest Service road. This hill was not as steep, but it was about 3 miles long. The White River Canyon is on the right here, with no level place to stop until you arrived at the bottom at the Forest Service road crossing of White River. However, the old emigrant road continued on around to the right here to cross the river at this spot where Jim, Orson, and Ruth's son in another scout trail trek in 1961 looks across at the old bridge which is over the old ford, used by the freighters and stagecoaches. On up the White River was Klinger's Camp. This photo, taken of Orson and Ruth's daughter Marcia on the left, and Ruth in 1961, shows only a few stones remaining of Lewis Klinger's camp. He crossed the plains at the age of 10 years, passed this spot on the old road, later to return here to set up a place to sell supplies, grain and hay, to Oregon City-bound emigrants. Here, Jim and another scout, Jack Lesh, on another trail search, study a blaze mark on a tree along the old road, which has the initials JWS, August 16, 1888, inscribed in it. The Barlow Road heads west, which carried later road traffic and a few jitneys of the early 1900s. Just as the Thai Indians had told them, the Barlow emigrants awoke one morning to find the cold rain, which had been slowing down their trailblazing, had turned to the first light snow, and by the time they had built a cabin from the trees which they had fallen, the road ahead was under snow. Placing their meager possessions in the cabin, the wagons around it, they left it in the hands of a trusted friend, and with the women and children riding the oxen, headed for Oregon City, 50 miles away. The cabin which they left is believed to have been situated here in Devil's Half Acre. Why this spot was named this, no one knows, as it had plenty of lush grass, water, and wood. In 1961, the old Barlow ruts could still be seen leading into the spot. From here, the old trail led to this spot on the old loop highway at the summit of Barlow Pass and this marker. The service road is not the old trail, which is in the heavy treed area about 100 feet or so on the right, where it crosses under the highway, to continue on down through the timber, just as Barlow's men blazed it over 140 years ago. A 2-mile hike down this old trace will bring you to this pile of stones, which has marked the resting place for an unknown pioneer woman. Her husband must have buried her here, piled on enough heavy stones to protect the grave from the animals and Indians. planning to return to properly mark it later, but never did. In the pioneer days, this task was always taken care of. If not, then her husband could have died further on the trail or soon after arriving at his destination. As following wagon trains passed the grave, emigrants added more rocks, as was the custom. In a colorful ceremony in August 1982, the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, placed this new stone on the grave. Close by, the old Barlow crossed Salmon Creek heading west, another view of the crossing looking east. In the deep woods below Highway 26, the old trail crosses a branch of Salmon River, turns, cutting a deep swale in the soft earth and around the tree base, as it heads up the hill toward Summit Meadows. The old trace as it comes into the meadows is a mounted Forest Service road leading into Summit Meadows, one of the favorite camping spots for the emigrant trains. Here they got their first real close-up look of this magnificent Mount Hood, which had been guiding them these many past days. This was also the place that Barlow and Rector placed their number 3 toll gate. This old graveyard is the resting place of P. Vickers, who arrived here in Oregon in 1866 and built a hostelry here, calling it Summit House. Vickers was Mount Hood's first professional mountain guide. In August 1883, he was gunned down while helping to capture an outlaw. The other grave is that of the infant son of W. L. Barclay, born on the trail July 15, 1882, and died here on September 14th, the same year. The other gravestone is unmarked. The fence around the site after many, many countless years was replaced on July 13, 1987, as a Boy Scout and troop project by troops number 517 and 606. The meadow also shelters this grave of baby Rachel Morgan, born at Independence Rock, June 1847, and died here on October 23rd, 4 months later. Stories vary on the cause of the child's death. One was that the infant's bed had been placed behind the wagon in the shade. Someone, not knowing the child was there, dropped the tailgate while adjusting it in loading, killing the infant. Heading west out of the meadow, the old Barlow Road went through present-day government camp. This name was given to the spot when the Oregon Mounted Rifles had to abandon 45 wagons here while en route from the Dalles to Oregon City after nearly two-thirds of their mules and horses died, probably after eating the laurel bushes which grow profusely on the mountainside. From here, the old ruts of the road cut through the timber as it heads for Laurel Hill. Highway 26 cuts through the hill here, through what is left of the old saddle, considered to be one of the toughest of the hills the emigrants faced on the entire Oregon Trail. Some 4 miles long, 500 feet high, on a sheer broken ridge overlooking Camp Creek. This view shows the 2 highway cuts looking east. Old number 26 is just below the tops of the trees in the distance. The newer Highway 26 is just out of view, in a deeper cut, just below the flowering rhododendron bush. The old Barlow Road comes out of the timber at the top of the picture, and Ruth Goodrich is seen here standing in the old swale. Now the old trace of the trail heads for chute number 1 as the drop-off into Camp Creek Canyon was called during the trail days. This was a sheer drop-off onto several wide ledges. By removing the wheels from the wagons, they lowered them, the stock slung in ropes, ledge by ledge. The wagon trains that followed in later years finally wore the ledges off, creating this rocky chute. Then the wagons were lowered into the canyon in the manner shown here. Note the tall tree at the top. later burned in a forest fire. It was still here when photographed in 1960, the last of the several rope-burned trees that stood here. One is believed to be on display in the Capitol building in Salem. This one was saved during a recent forest fire. It let many wagons down over the ledges, and in later years this chute. To the right in this view, the emigrants felled many trees packed with underbrush to create a bank as used today on racetracks to help turn the fast sliding wagons and teams to a more level place in the mountain saddle, to keep them from plunging further down into the Camp Creek Canyon below. This marker on the highway marks this halfway mark of the saddle. The old road then passed under Highway 26, just this side of the Laurel Hill marker, from right to left. The old trace now heads west along the rest of Laurel Hill for around 2 miles through some very heavy second-growth trees and underbrush, making it very difficult to locate. Here, Clackamas and Wasco County Historical Society old wagon trail tracers try to locate the old road. Even with previous markings with a red ribbon by a mounted National Forest surveying crew, finding the old trace through here was very difficult because of the forest fires of the past years. Near the second drop-off, or chute number 2 into Zigzag Canyon, is this rope burn tree. Orson points to the very weak rope burns, as this chute was not as steep as the one further back on Laurel. A more recent fire and the weather has added to the deterioration. A view of chute number 2 as it heads down toward the canyon and the Zigzag River, but is now cut off by the new Highway 26, where a member of the CCHS, or Wasco County Historical Society, crosses over to view the Zigzag River Canyon below, where more heavy timber awaits the emigrants as they head for Oregon City. Below Laurel Hill, the old road has a little easier going, as the immigrants fell just enough trees to allow them to squeeze or drive their wagons through. This caused blaze marks on some of the trees by the hubs on the wheels and the boughs of the wagons at the top when they were forced through rather than fall one more tree. If one looks carefully today along these places, you can still find them. A brow log placed here is all that remains of the old bridge at the only crossing of the Zigzag River. Men could still be seen when this picture was shot in August 1972 that belonged to the Barlow and Rector organization. This is where the old road crossed the little Zigzag River. These old bridges were placed for the later wagon trains, stagecoaches, freighters, even the old jitneys or automobiles of the early 1900s. This constant use in the later years is one reason that this old emigrant road is so visible today. Out of the heavy timber on the left comes the old trail crossing under Highway 26 on its way to Toll Gate 5. This a replica of Toll Gate Park and Campground. The severe floods of 1962 wiped out most of the area here, but spared the gate and the old trail seen here. The toll gates were moved quite frequently as the emigrants would go around them in the more dense timber. When caught doing this, the penalty was 3 times the usual fee and court costs. This is how this old toll gate area looked in 1885. This same picture is on the rock marker in the previous picture, but if the vandalism continues as it has, it will be unreadable. In August 1972, a television special was made here at the gate to honor the last living toll gatekeeper, 90 years young Arlie Mitchell. He was the toll taker and keeper here from 1905 to 1908. He died on June 1st, 1976. Born in Sandy, Oregon, 1886. There were 5 toll gates along the Barlow Road. Number 1 at Gate Creek, number 2 at Revenue Crossing of the Sandy River, number 3 at Summit Meadows, number 4 3 miles east of Rhododendron, and number 5 here 1 mile east at Tollgate Park. 1846 to 1915. Records show that in October 1846, after Barlow and Rector put the road through, 146 wagons, 1,500 head of cattle, horses, mules, and 13 head of sheep arrived at Eagle Creek, some 25 miles west of Tollgate 5. 7 wagons came through just before the closing of the road for the winter, making a total of 153 wagons and 700 persons. In the community of Rhododendron is this stone which marks the old road's route. Through heavy timber and underbrush, it now heads for its first crossing of the Sandy River at this rocky area near Zigzag. Here was located a Hudson Bay post, but any remains of that were washed out by the 1964 flood. An earlier part of the Barlow Road or alternate ran from the Fabian area straight west, paralleling Highway 26, south or near the communities of Zigzag and Wemme, and at or near the present-day Mount Hood RV area. The old Barlow alternate heads north and west after crossing Highway 26, coming out just west of today's Brightwood to Salmon Creek, which it followed along its east bank to the Sandy River, where it crossed over to that river's north bank, up to the other branch of the Barlow coming west from near Rhododendron. After leaving the Rhododendron-Fabian area, the old Barlow alternate crossed Highway 26 near this spot, a few hundred feet south through or near the communities of Zigzag and Wemme. The Barlow alternate is just to the left in this view between Old 26, between Zigzag and Wemme. In the area between Wemme and Brightwood, the old road is just about 30 feet from the busy highway to Mount Hood and points east. In the heavy underbrush and forest is this stone marker off the shoulder of the road into the Wildwood Recreation Area, and a look at the old road as it crosses one of the other roads into the private homes which are nearby. Just west of this view, the old road passed near or through the entrance to the Mount Hood Recreational Vehicle Site, just to the left and out of camera range near the top of this view. Crossing the main highway near this spot, following in or close or under Old Highway 26 as it heads for Brightwood toward the northwest. Passing near Brightwood, the Barlow took off for a spot near this crossing of the highway of Salmon Creek, where it closely followed it through the heavy underbrush and forest as it headed for the crossing of the Sandy River. Here in the cluster of summer homes, it appears that this homeowner used some of the old swale for an outdoor picnic spot. The old Barlow then crossed the Sandy River up to an area near this new marker on the road to Burnt Rock. This pioneer camping marker was dedicated on Friday, August 17, 1984, by the Clackamas County Historical Society, who furnished it during that year's 3rd annual convention of OCTA, which was being held in Oregon City. A view from the marker looking west, today's present highway is right over the old Barlow, here and there or follows close by, as it heads for the Devil's Backbone, an 8-mile drive for the immigrants and their wagons, which took a good 2 days. Burnt Rock Corral, a favorite campsite, was a huge smoke-blackened rock which was a fireplace for many an emigrant train. Ropes were strung from tree to tree to contain their stock, with the white-topped wagons around the outer perimeter. Today's present highway is right over the old Barlow, here and there or nearby, as it heads west along the top of the Devil's Backbone, to, through or near the small community of Marmot, where Fred and Ernest Sievers staked out their donation land claim in around 1850. Adolph Aschoff, a forester and guide around the Mount Hood area, also settled here in 1883, where he noticed many peculiar burrowings in the fern growth, which the local settlers were sure were dug by marmots. But Aschoff, after careful study, proved that it was mountain beavers which were the culprits, so the residents decided to call their community Marmot in honor of their mistake. Here, Mount Hood peaks over this hill as the old road heads down into the canyon of the Sandy River for the second crossing of the river near Revenue Bridge about 2 miles away. Following nearby or just under the Ten Ikes, very curving road for those few miles, the Barlow crossed the Sandy just west of the Revenue Bridge, seen here. A view of the crossing downstream from the bridge where the point of land extends out into the river. Here, near Sandy, Don Krebs walks along a section of the old swale, which fronts his property as the old road nears the crossing. A close-up view of the crossing or ford at the Ripple or narrow gravel bar. On both sides of that spot are very deep holes, where the drivers of the wagons had to be very careful as they went from the right in this view to the left, then on to the very long pulls up the Meinig Hill. From out of this heavily overgrown brush and trees, the old road came up from the river, where this appears was a good resting or campsite for the emigrants, just before taking on the 2 steep hills just north of today's Sandy, Oregon. This meadow served as a resting spot between the 2 hills. Both hills, of around 30% grades like before, followed the paved county road, just under it or nearby, with its many sharp curves, as this newly placed marker shows. It has just been recently that the Barlow Road has been made officially a part of the Oregon Trail under the National Historical Trails Act, under the supervision of the National Park Service. OCTA is working very hard to place as many of our old historical wagon roads and trails under this act as possible for protection. In this way, our future generations will also be able to see a very important part of our nation's history. Just east of Sandy, Oregon, on Highway 26, the Oregon Trail Barlow Road passes through the suburban Ford Agency and the Assembly of God church areas into the Meinig Park as it headed south along, under, or near Highway 211. Looking west on 26, Ten Ike Road from the right crosses over and becomes Highway 211, which the old trail followed south toward the community of Eagle Creek, Oregon. The stone marker in front of the Sandy, Oregon post office. Highway 211 south from Meinig Park follows the general route of the Barlow Road under, or mostly to the northwest side, where the Goodriches found this, of course now gone, arrowhead marker of the old road of earlier days in 1956 near the Sandy Ridge area. From near this spot on the highway, the old road went through this orchard to its west side, where this swale still was visible, also in 1956, and as it went down this hill toward the community of Eagle Creek, where this stone marker marks the old road's route. The old Foster home was built in 1883, next to their old log cabin built in 1845. The huge lilac trees were planted by the Fosters from seeds sent in a shipment to them from the east around Cape Horn, South America. It was here that Barlow and Rector, trail-weary and tired, arrived ahead of the rest of the emigrants of their train looking for help. Barlow and Rector, after a good meal and rest, took off on horseback to Oregon City for supplies, then returned to intercept the rest of the trail-weary emigrants coming off the lower slopes of a snow-covered mountain. However, Rector and his wife, she now in very poor health, decided to retrace their way back to the Dalles. Taking 2 horses and enough supplies, and with help from the Thai Indians, made it to the fort. They then rafted to Oregon City, down the Columbia, and up the Willamette rivers. It was here at the ranch that the Barlow emigrant train received their first home-cooked meals since leaving Independence, Missouri, a good 5 months back. The Fosters from then on furnished most of the later immigrants with fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits. About 1/4 of a mile from the ranch, on a hill overlooking the Foster place, is this almost forgotten graveyard, where are buried many of the Barlow Road emigrants and settlers of the area, including several small children who, not having eaten fresh fruit for many months, overindulged themselves from having such a great supply, and tragically died almost instantly. The train's first deaths Philip Foster, 1805 to 1884, at 79 years. His wife, Mary Pettigrew Foster, 1811 to 1880, 69 years. Between the Foster home and the today's number 211 highway, the Barlow Road went on towards the Eagle Creek Ford or crossing, just west of the bridge at the foot of the Doughty Road Hill at Camp Millard. Just south of the bridge, where the Doughty Road starts to climb the hill, is this Oregon trail marker. Please look at this photo carefully. It was placed there by Troop Number 119 and the Portland Area Scout Council as it looked in 1960 and how it looks today after vandalism takes over. The bronze medallion has been stripped off, leaving just the engraving in the concrete near the bottom. When Orson Goodrich contacted the Scout headquarters, they were not aware that the marker was even there. At this time, they doubt that the old marker will be replaced, which we can easily understand. The county road follows pretty close the old wagon road up this steep hill to the crossing at the Feldenheimer's place. The old road down to the river crossing is this driveway to the garage where it crossed the Clackamas River. No quicksand, fast, turbulent water, or crumbling soft riverbank, just a solid, good, rocky bottom. This was the later river crossing. The Barlows and earlier wagon trains crossed at a ford just east of the bridge at Carver, around 8 miles downstream. About a mile northwest of the entrance to the McIver State Park on Springwater Road, from an overlook, is about the area the Barlow Road crossed the river from right to left. And a little further on is the Feldenheimer Road coming up from the river to meet the paved highway, which heads for the Logan-Welsata Park area, which is heavily settled with small farms and homes. To the crossing at Carver, where it went up this now paved hill, passing this log cabin built by Horace and Jane Baker in the years from 1845 to 1856. Horace also worked the stone quarry near here, which furnished the stone for the locks at the falls at Oregon City, as well as for many of the early buildings in Portland. This old stagecoach, mud or dirt wagon, called such by those who rode in them, and the type of weather encountered, billowed dust or flying mud. Once the driver left his destination, he wasn't about to stop to lower the side curtains. The path leading through the field is about on the old trace as the Barlow heads for the distant hill towards the upper Logan area. The Goodriches found these pristine ruts in the Redlands area, behind a small ranch barn. We wonder if they are still there. This photo taken in 1960. Looking back at Mount Hood in the distance, just before reaching to the top of Holcomb Hill, the last long pull before reaching Oregon City. The A.B. Holcomb Place, this photo also taken in 1960, was being refurbished by its new owners to keep some of the original look inside and out. The huge old wood stove for cooking large meals on, the long old wooden table for serving many meals to the stagecoach passengers and freight wagon drivers who stopped here sometimes overnight. This was the first and last stop after leaving and before entering Oregon City. Note the many rooms upstairs for the overnight guests. The old 100-year-old barn and stables in the rear had been torn down years ago. Also note the very high porch for the stagecoach passengers to step out onto. Even here, at certain times of the year, the old swale to the high porch and to and from the place can still be seen today. The Holcomb Hill from the Bradley Road intersection, this photo taken from the old Holcomb schoolyard with the old trace of the Barlow still showing in the tall grass in the foreground. Abernethy Creek Canyon and the view of the Oregon City area, today where the immigrants might have viewed it. One can imagine that many an Oregon Cityer of that time may have come out to this spot or the Holcomb area to welcome the newcomers or to see if they might find any new friends or relatives. The old Barlow Road did not follow Abernethy Creek into the city because of the heavy underbrush, but kept up higher on the hill, coming down into Kelly Field in the distance in this view. Of course, today, a new freeway cuts through here south to the Clackamas Community College area. Old traces of the Barlow, Oregon Trail are no longer to be seen here. Another view of Kelly Field and the stone marker where all the wagons and emigrants stopped. They had reached their destination. From here, they moved out once again to stake out their donation land claims on a place of their own choosing, to return to the small city by the falls to register those claims. This picture of Oregon City in 1857. This one taken in 1985. The stone marker in Kelly Field marks the end of the trail for those who had labored hard and long for some 16 to 22 weeks to claim this beautiful Northwest for us to now love and enjoy.